This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So grab your adult beverage of choice, or grab the whole bottle, or grab a couple bottles. Have some tea, dessert, relax, and thank you for spending the next hour with us as Charlie's going to do a segment about dead bread, where he discusses money earned by estates, family members, surviving band members after the death of a star.
Did you say Death Star?
And the second,
That's Star Wars. Oh, Death of a Star. Sorry.
Death of a Star, like Death of a Salesman. In the second half,
Linda,
I'm going to talk about clinical trials.
Linda, I said I'm home. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
That is the saddest play. And in our third half, we're going to be drinking with death. So, Charlie, do you remember Saunders' bumpy cake?
Do I remember Saunders' bumpy cake? No, that's not true.
Liar.
Yeah, I know. Listen, remember on Woodward in downtown Detroit, that great Saunders Bakery was 2 levels, and my mom would take us when we were little kids and go down to the the fountain area was in the basement, I think. I think it was in the basement. It was spectacular. But yes, bumpy cake, and.
So Saunders is an ice cream bakery candy store in Detroit of our youth.
It would be good to explain what Saunders is. Yes.
Of our youth. And it was phenomenal.
It was.
And it still exists, but it's not what it was.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. You have a lot of chocolate bars today, or even like something like Twinkies or what do you call it? The Hostess cupcake things. Remember when we were kids? I mean that was really soft sponge cake. The filling tasted like filling, and not just a concoction of chemicals like it does today. And it was the same with the bumpy cake. I mean, it had the buttercream. So, are
you going to tell people what the bumpy cake is all about? So, if you're going to do Death by Chocolate,
yes,
Saunders bumpy cake is the way to go.
I was going to say, if you're going to do Death by Chocolate, yeah, baby, that's the way to go. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Just put that right in your veins.
Yeah. So it was covered in fudge. And bumpy cake because it had bumps, but it had bumps of buttercream, vanilla buttercream. Was it vanilla or some yellowish thing? I don't remember. No, it was vanilla.
No, it was vanilla. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was. I mean, and when we say buttercream, I mean it was vanilla and buttery.
It was butter.
And yeah, so I mean, imagine like a Hostess cupcake, but like a sheet cake. It was just smooth and polished. I don't think they put shoe polish and buffed it up, but it was I mean, it's just and let's see, how long ago? So Saunders it's over 100 years old. I don't remember. How old is the bumpy cake? Do you know, Marianne?
It dates back to 1913.
It's not over 100 years, okay.
Yeah. And it was like a devil's food, this wonderful devil's food chocolate cake. And then, like instead of buttercream frosting just spread on it. Mm-hmm. Well, actually what happened, Fred Saunders was the owner of the place. And one day he had run out of enough buttercream to frost the top of the cake with the buttercream.
Yeah.
So he put it in one of his pastry bags and he just made bumps along the top of the cake. And then he covered it with the fudge frosting.
Mm.
And people liked that so much that he stopped frosting it with the buttercream and invented the bumpy cake.
Wait, those happy accidents, there's something else too, where
like Toll House cookies.
What was the accident there?
She was supposed to put like I don't know if she was supposed to melt the chocolate into the cookies
Hmm.
or something, and she didn't quite get what she was supposed to do, so
Yeah.
she just chopped it into chunks and mixed it in the cookies, and thus invented chocolate chip cookies.
I did not know that.
Hey, when it comes to chocolate, just ask me.
It was someone who it was, and I don't remember if it was a pastry or maybe some sort of dressing, but the same thing happened. The woman or the man ran out of the ingredient and just grabbed whatever it was, and it was spectacular. Well, that's a helpful story. Okay, so
Yeah, I can't wait to try some of that,
yes,
whatever it is.
some of the Casper recipe, yes. So
So back to Bumpy Cake.
yes. You know, wait a minute, and nowadays it's not. Gosh, I just haven't had it in years. But my family's all out there, and I think somebody said that they have different flavors now, right? I think.
Oh, do they? I don't know. I don't live there anymore. But I had this urge for Bumpy Cake, so I Googled it and found a recipe that supposedly had been in the Detroit News as a, knockoff Bumpy Cake.
Yeah.
And so I made it.
And
it was phenomenal. So it just came out right. And the frosting is really actually like fudge because you have to boil it up to a certain temperature.
Yeah.
But then you have to let it cool down enough so it doesn't melt the buttercream, so you get that right just perfect. I'm telling you, it was so good. And then, you know what happened? I'll tell you.
Okay.
No, I'm going to tell you. Don't try and talk me out of it.
Trying to guess.
So I left it on the counter, and I go off in another room, and I come back, and the middle of the cake is gone. And I'm like, what the hey-ho happened here?
Mm-hmm.
One of the dogs decided to counter-surf and ate the middle out of my doggone Bumpy Cake. Not the cake part, the frosting part.
I find it interesting that the dog just went for the middle and created a new design.
Yeah, let me tell you. Now, my fantasy had always been to just be able to eat the top off the Bumpy Cake and just have a little bit of the cake, but more of the fudge and the buttercream.
And that's the great thing about being an
Stupid
adult.
dog did
Yes.
it.
Well,
yeah. So here I make a whole doggone Bumpy Cake, and he eats the frosting off of half of it. I was not happy.
so with what remained, were you pleased?
Well, fortunately, we had our servings of unadulterated Bumpy Cake before Harley got to it. And yeah, let me tell you. And then I gave a piece to each of my girls, and they're like, oh yeah, this is good. Although I don't think Saunders made a bad cake, did they?
Not to my recollection. No, not at all.
Yes.
Yeah. So
if anybody
yeah.
if anybody goes to Michigan, check out Saunders.
Yes.
And guess what, Charlie? We have the recipe on our webpage.
Oh.
And I was going to take a picture. Well, actually, I did take a picture, but it was like after the dog ate the middle of it, and I thought nobody's going to find this very appetizing.
I think you should have taken a picture of Harley with the icing, like and the cake on his nose. Please go to everyonedies.org. That's dies.org, and send us your own recipes to share with others. Also, we appreciate your questions, jokes, and anything else you want to tell us. Well, almost anything else. You can email us.
No, I want to hear everything else.
Well, then, okay, then everything you want to tell us. Or more to the point, Marianne. Email us at everyonedies.org. Please join our Facebook group, Everyone Dies. And please remember to rate and review this podcast. Molly, our Twitter wench, is hoping you contribute to her happiness by following us on Twitter and reposting her tweets.
So, Charlie, I understand you're going to present an eyewitness report titled Dead Bread.
Says you. Oh, yes, I am, actually. Yes, I am. So, Marianne.
Charlie.
Yes, that's me. So, generally speaking, who do you think gets money made that still continues to generate after a celebrity dies?
How much money?
Just money in general. It could be Michael Jackson type of money, or a very minor celebrity like. I better not mention a minor celebrity that might come back to bite me.
Well, it's got to be like millions, if not billions, because of records and movies and right.
Generally speaking, yes. But do you know?
Is it millions or billions?
Well, it'll depend on the artist. And over a period amount of time. Right now, the biggest dead celebrity in terms of generating money is Michael Jackson. Mm-hmm. And since his death, was it 9 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. Take a guess as to and remember, before he died, he was hemorrhaging money, spent a lot of money on different goofy things. We won't say what some of them are, and including his ranch. His name I just forgot. Neverland,
Neverland.
Yeah, like a little miniature Disneyland. I mean, this guy was hemorrhaging. Marianne,
hemorrhaging.
Thank you. Hemorrhaging money left and right. Since he died, take a guess how much he's pulled in.
I'm such a Midwest kind of person that anything over $5,000 is, you could say, $1 million or $6 billion. And if it's over $5,000, my head has no comprehension for it. So I don't know, $2 billion.
Just a bit high. Actually, it's roughly like around $400 million since he died.
Oh.
Yes.
That's a lot, though, right?
Yes. Well, for someone who's dead, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's more than 5,000.
Yeah. Hang on. 1, 2, 3 zeros. And yes, it is.
Well, no, you know that Midwestern kind of attitude about money, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at least the way we grew up.
Yeah. Once upon a time, never mind. So, tangible assets. So, for example, things like cars, bank accounts, houses. And then there are intangible assets, copyrights, trademarks, and the rights of publicity, which is the right to use, a dead person's name and likeness. So, beyond that, who gets the profits? Well, of course, lawyers get their cuts. Could be 10 to 20%. Record labels get a cut. Of course, income tax can grab up to like 40%. And the IRS takes a one-time estate tax, which is not a small amount. Now, in a will, an artist, of course, will specify who gets what after a death. But in terms of royalties, for example, will last around 70 years after an artist dies. But only if a work was created, it was the late 70s. Yeah, it was only if it was created after January of 1978. So if it's something made from 1978 on, the copyright lasts, for 70 years after the artist dies.
What about before 78?
Before 78, I think the maximum was 50. And the further back you go, there were, of course, a lot of unscrupulous people. So artists didn't always enjoy their, the fruits of their labor. And especially people like, minorities, or just not very savvy about, um, legal rights and copyrights, or if they just made, not, I don't want to say the decisions of selling a copyright were not smart, but some were just not very, sophisticated in that. The Jerry Schuster and, oh brother, the co I forgot his name, but the two
Simon, like Simon and Schuster,
yeah,
Paul Simon.
yeah, they weren't related. They weren't related to the Schuster publishing company, but Jerry Schuster and his partner who created Superman.
Oh,
Yeah, sold the rights, and yeah, when Superman really took off, they made no money, and they tried to go back
no
to
pun intended.
yes,
Babu.
and they tried to sue and everything, but they sold the rights off. I mean, eventually later, Warner, who picked up the Superman movies and everything, gave them some money in DC Comics, but yeah, they signed everything away, so
Wow.
nothing, So where was it? Properties, 78. So basically, with any property, your heirs will inherit. I have to take off my glasses here. These glasses are killing me. Now, the same is, with copyrights, unless, of course, you're Prince, who left no will, and his heirs are still battling after the Purple One's death. And he died like 4 years ago now, because no will,
And he
no
didn't
heirs.
have a will?
Nope.
Let that be a lesson to our listeners.
Yes.
Have a will.
Yes, please.
Even if you're not Prince.
Yes.
Have a will.
Sound advice.
Yeah.
Now, you can also, of course, in a will, you will specify who you want to have what. But not only that, you can also specify how you want your work used. Oh, yeah. Also, after the 70 years that I mentioned, after 70-year copyright expires, the works go into the public domain. Some famous people, for example, William Shakespeare. He's been dead over 70 years. All of his work is in the public domain. Now, celebrities, of course, after their death, can still make millions of dollars. Albert Einstein, for example, the Einstein estate pulls in millions from posters, T-shirts, and tablets, like little computer tablets.
And hair products, I heard.
Really? Hair products? Einstein? You're making it funny. Okay. Gel. Yes, right. That's right. Einstein gel. There we are. So he had to figure out something to keep those photons and protons together. No, not photons. That's Star Trek.
You are so slow tonight, Charlie.
Oh, I really am. Oh, death, where is thy sting? So, in addition to Einstein, people like Einstein, of course, there are computer-generated images, which have shown, Marilyn Monroe promoting Chanel No. 5, Steve McQueen in a Porsche, a modern Porsche, of course, and even Gene Kelly singing for Volkswagen. In the rain, of course. Now, in the last year, in the 2019's list of the highest-paid dead celebrities, again, Michael Jackson pulled in, over $5,000. Last year, he pulled in $60 million. Just last year. Following him was his father-in-law, Elvis Presley. I just forgot about that, Dad.
I forgot about that.
Elvis was his father-in-law. Elvis pulled in $39 million. Charles Schwab, creator of the Peanuts comic strip, came in also at $39 million. Golf legend Arnold Palmer pulled in $30 million. Reggae star Bob Marley, $20 million. And Dr. Seuss, not a mean one, pulled in $19 million, his estate. Yep. Now.
Well, I don't think we're going to be doing that for our families, Charlie.
Oh, ye of little faith. You never know. Now,
I think I know.
okay. So, 25 years after his death, Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead thrives. Money-wise, the band hasn't played a gig since 1995, but remains profitable. I know, it's crazy, 1995.
Wow.
But, they remain profitable in things like clothing, sneakers. Yeah, sneakers. Listen, there's
great ties. They have great ties.
Yeah, there we are. Listen, their sneakers go on, for thousands of dollars on eBay.
Come on.
Go figure. I guess the old PF Flyers are just no more. Of course, unless you put them on eBay, then okay, there you are. You have something.
Okay.
And and in addition to that, there are a lot of Deadhead inspired bands, including Dead and Company, which has a lot of the original Grateful Dead members, and they play tours. And what's interesting is that the Grateful Dead in real life, when the band was together, never really made a lot of money. But Dead and Company, I mean, just like in the past 5 years, pulled in $250 million.
Oh my gosh!
I know. And this group, the Dead, according to Variety magazine, can command like $150 million for rights to its name, likeness, and IP. So the Grateful Dead represents a tradition, like a period of time, and it just keeps on trucking.
It's nostalgia. Good thing we didn't use any of their art for our Everyone Dies. We'd be in trouble.
Oh, yeah. Yes, good point.
Mm-hmm. Good thing Sandy keeps us honest.
Yes.
So thank you, Charlie, for that dead bread point of information and all the money that people can make after they die. But I think you have to kind of make some money before you die, I guess. So
yes.
That's going to leave us out. So in our second half, we're going to chat about clinical trials. Please take a look at additional resources for this podcast on our webpage, everyonedies.org, and write to us. Tell us what kinds of things you're interested in us talking about. So, Charlie, do you know what clinical trials are?
Not completely.
Clinical trials are a way to test new methods of diagnosing, treating, or preventing health conditions. The goal is to determine if something is safe for people, and is it going to work for the disease that it's being tested for. Clinical trials are only done if there's a good reason to believe that the test or the treatment may improve care for people. So categories of what are clinical trials are things like vaccines, medications, combinations of medications, new uses for existing medications, and medical devices. So, for example, with the coronavirus, we've heard of different meds that are used for other diseases being touted as, this will be effective for the coronavirus. Well,
that doesn't include
there's never been
that doesn't include hydrochloroquine, right?
Well, hydrochloroquine is one of those, right? So we've been told, hey, this will help. And there's anecdotal, meaning in one hospital or in one center, somebody's tried it with a few people, and they say that it's worked. But it hasn't gone through a clinical trial. So if you just willy-nilly say, okay, let's use that for everybody with COVID, and then people start dying, then the Food and Drug Administration and the government is at fault for saying this drug can be used to treat this without the proper clinical trial. So the whole purpose is not to keep things that can cure you or help you out of your hands. The idea is to make sure that whatever we're doing has been tested in humans for the disease at the dose that we're going to say, okay, here's what we're going to give you.
Okay, good.
So
Thank you for clarifying that.
there are five phases. And so if you're just, now we hear a lot of people talking about, well, we need a vaccine for COVID and why, what's taking so long. So when I talk about these phases, then you'll have a sense of what takes so long. Because if you rush something to market, meaning you skip some of these phases, you can put people in terrible danger. So the first phase is phase 0. Phase zero is the first trials that are done with people. The purpose is to see how the drug is processed and how it will affect the body. So before phase 0, the testing has all been in animals. At phase 0, they say, okay, we're going to approve this for phase 0 clinical trial. It's going to be done with a very small number of people, usually 15 to 30 people. Investigators use a very small dose of the medication to make sure it isn't harmful to humans before they start using it at higher doses in later phases. If the medication starts to act differently than what they expect, the investigators will do some additional preclinical research, meaning go back to the cats or mice or whatever they were using before they decide whether or not they're going to continue the trial. Mm-hmm. So phase 0 is just that very beginning. Then there's phase 1. So people who have cancer and some other diseases might be familiar with phase 1 clinical trials because those trials you'll see at NCI, National Cancer Institute, designated centers that conduct phase 1 trials. Now, the aim of a phase 1 trial is to figure out what's the best dose with the fewest side effects of this medication. The purpose is not to treat the patients. It's not to try to cure the cancer. The purpose is to find out how safe is this drug? So the purpose is to test the drug's safety. So phase 1 clinical trials spend several months looking at the effects of medications on 20 to 80 people, sometimes a little bit more, who have no underlying health conditions. They start with a low dose. They increase it until the effects are too severe or until they see results. So the aim is to figure out the highest dose that humans can take without serious side effects. People who are in phase 1 trials are monitored very closely to see how their bodies do. Preclinical research, before use with people, provides some general information about dosing, but the effects on the human body really can be pretty unpredictable. So that's what the phase 1 studies are about. About 70% of drugs who go through phase 1 trials get promoted or move up to phase 2 trials. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of a phase 2 clinical trial is safety plus does it work? And it's not compared to the standard of care medication. It's just, is it safe and does it work? So when we're talking about standard of care medication, you could say, well, if you have ovarian cancer, stage 2 ovarian cancer, standard of care is carboplatin and Taxol. That's the standard of care. That's where your doctor, your oncologist is going to start with your treatment. In a phase 2 trial, they're not comparing that phase 2 drug with the standard of treatment. They're going to give it to somebody with ovarian cancer and say, is it safe on you, and does it help slow or stop your ovarian cancer? Phase 2 trials usually involves several hundred participants who are living with the condition that the new medication is meant to treat. They're usually given the same dose that was found to be safe in the previous phase, in the phase 1 trial. Also, the study looks at different combinations of drugs. Sometimes it'll be a new drug plus an older drug, like whatever this new drug is plus Taxol, or whatever this new drug is plus bevacizumab. Whatever it is, they'll try different combinations because some drugs will work at different times in the cell cycle, and other drugs will work at other times in the cell cycle. So they're looking to see, well, if we put these two together, is that like the secret sauce that's going to stop this cancer?
So would that be something similar to that? Let's use a martini, for example. So you have, like you can have a gin martini, of course, a traditional great gin martini, not vodka, or you can have a vodka martini to compare. However, then you can also have a Vesper, which is the James Bond martini, the Daniel Craig era, where it's a combination of gin and vodka. And kids, don't try this at home. Actually, no, you better try it at home, not out. You don't want to be out driving anywhere. Okay, so I'm sorry, you were saying?
But a phase 2 might be the chocolate martini. Or, so it might be adding just another little twist to see, is it, I don't know, safe? And does it fix what's ailing you?
Yes, and if a twist doesn't work, there are always olives or the traditional onion, which I prefer olives, but I guess that's not what you're talking about. Go on, about a twist.
So investigators monitored participants for several months or years to see the effect of the medication, because sometimes, side effects don't show up right away. And maybe the side effect comes in harming, sperm in a male so that they're not able to reproduce, or there's birth defects in the babies, or, that's it. When you're looking at these long-term studies, that's what they're looking for, to make sure like future generations aren't hurt by the medication. While phase 2 involves more participants than earlier phases, it's still not large enough to demonstrate the overall safety of the medication. But the data is collected during this phase, and it helps investigators come up with what will be the phase 3 trial. So completing a phase 2 trial, not having any major safety concerns, and maybe even some positive results, drugs can move on to phase 3 trials. About 33% of the drugs who make it through phase 2 go on to phase 3. So you can see as it gets whittled down that you can get a sense of how long it takes to get a drug through the process. But again, it has to go through that process, or you're going to end up with, remember when moms, like our generation, took thalidomide to help them not have miscarriages?
Oh, yeah, yes.
And then the babies were born with very short limbs?
Yeah.
Well, that didn't go through a clinical trial.
Oh.
And if it had, they would have known in a small number of people that that's what happens, rather than giving it as a general drug to a lot of women.
Well, okay, so then enlighten me. All this push to have, treatment for the coronavirus, people are really trying to push it for this year. By the end of the year, could we trust something like that? That we would only take a matter of months to come up with a plan. With a treatment.
Well, if that's all that the scientists were doing, and they take it through all the steps, it's possible to take it through all the steps. In a couple of months, I don't see how that would be possible, because you don't have any long-term trials to see what's going to be the effect. I think what our listeners need to know is that whenever you're rushing something through, like I've been reading that Russia hasn't kind of really gone through
Right. Yeah.
all the
And they're
steps
pushing this thing.
with
Yeah.
their vaccine.
Right.
And they're saying, we have a vaccine ready. Well, based on listening to us talk about these clinical trials, that didn't go through that. And so are you willing to take a vaccine that hasn't been adequately tested? I'd be very nervous about doing that.
My quick answer would be no, but that's me.
Well, I'm the scientist in the group, so it's like, well, I don't think so, but convince me. So a phase 3 trial compares the new drug that we're testing to the standard of care. So we've talked about what the standard of care is. It's what we usually do in the situation. So how does the treatment go, the new drug, against what we usually do? They're looking at side effects and to see which one works better. So phase 3 clinical trials involve about 3,000 participants who have the condition that the new medication is meant to treat. Trials in this phase can last for several years. The purpose is to evaluate how the new medication works in comparison to existing medications for the same condition. To move forward with the trial, investigators need to demonstrate that the medication is at least safe and effective as the existing treatment options. Because if you have cancer, and it's a very aggressive cancer, you might not have a year to not take the standard of care and bet the farm on a drug that's brand new.
Right.
That year that you spend taking, quote unquote, potentially the wrong drug might have deadly consequences. On the other hand, maybe it is the cure. We don't know because we're testing it. So you don't want to put people in a position where if you've run out of options, if you've gone through all of the standards of care and you're on 3rd or 4th line treatment, you might say, I'm willing to see if this is going to work because I'm dying anyway from this disease. So if I have a small chance that maybe this is the cure, let me try that. So that's where that conversation and the ethics of that come in. Investigators, when they're setting up a phase 3 clinical trial, use a process called randomization, where there's a treatment group and there's a trial group. And randomization involves randomly choosing some participants that are going to get the new medication and others who are going to receive existing standard of care. Because they want to be able to say the differences in terms of the outcomes, in terms of how this person does, is because of the medication and not because of the differences between the groups.
Sure, of course.
Like if you put all women in one group and all men in another, well, how do you know it's the drug that worked and not the fact that it's the drug with men that worked? Yep. And on women, it might kill them all. So they want to make those two groups to be randomly assigned so that they are, as random as you can get, and make sure that both of those arms really look alike. Now, phase 3 trials tend to be double blind. So what that means is that as the patient who's in that trial, you don't know, are you getting the standard of care or the new drug? You don't know. Okay. And your oncologist doesn't know either. So that you're not able to say, have any preconceived notions about what's going on. You don't know what you're getting. Your doctor doesn't know what you're getting. They're just seeing what happens. Now, let's say that you're in a phase 3 trial. You've been randomized, and the researchers are able, if there's a lot of deaths or a lot of people are miraculously getting well, they're able to unblind it. And what that means is that, let's say you have a group, there's a group A and a group B, and everybody in group A is suddenly, walking, talking, and doing fantastically well, and their scans are showing the cancer's gone. Well, you don't sit on a drug that shows that through stages 4 and, all the way through. You don't do that. So what they would look at is to see, is that a statistically difference? And is this something that should be rushed to market? Meaning, this is incredible. We need to release this to the market as soon as we can. Conversely, if you have one group where everyone is suddenly having strokes and dying, you would say, holy bejeebers, what's happening here? And unblind it and say, oh, this isn't working. We need to stop this trial because everybody who's getting the new drug is dying.
Right, yeah. Ugh.
So there's two situations where that would happen. The phase 3 trials can be stopped if the side effects are too severe, if one group has better results, or if one group dies. But what the investigators are doing is that they need to demonstrate that the medication is at least safe. Oh, could you hear that? That was Harley. He must be so bored with this. That's my dog.
Probably looking for more cake.
No. Yeah. Oh, you know what? And I think it was him too. So they want to make sure that the drug is safe and is effective as what is already approved and on the market. So the FDA will approve it. So in a stage 4 trial, this is after the FDA approves the drug. So the drug gets approved at the end of the phase 3 if it's going to get approved. Phase 4 involves thousands of participants. It can last for many years. It allows for research on short-lived or long-lasting side effects, on safety, and to gather more data in terms of, like I said, the long-term safety, any other benefits. So the bottom line is that clinical trials and their individual phases are a very important part of clinical research. They allow the safety and the effectiveness of new drugs or treatment to be properly assessed before being approved for use with the general public. It's real important that we keep that in mind, that these scientific steps are put into effect to protect us, that things that we say are FDA approved can be used because they've been through these clinical trials and they're considered to be safe for use.
Human consumption,
Now,
okay.
Clinical trials can be pretty expensive. Research costs are usually paid for by the study sponsor. So if it's a drug, the study sponsor is usually the drug company who's producing that drug. Routine costs are payments that are owed for services that the person would receive whether or not they're in a clinical trial. So if you're, by standard of care, supposed to have a CAT scan with contrast every 6 months, and that's the standard, then your insurance will pay for that. If the clinical trial says, well, but we want one every 2 months, then there's some negotiation that, the insurance companies sometimes will balk at that, will say, we're not going to pay for that extra testing. Medicare tends to cover payment for routine costs. Some insurance companies will cover the cost if the trial is medically needed, if the costs are about the same as the standard of care. If there is no standard of care, because there's some, like COVID, we don't have a standard of care. We don't have a specific thing for that. And if the trial is funded by the National Cancer Institute, insurance companies will tend to pay for those. People have to decide if they want to join a clinical trial. There are many options for people with cancer. Standard of care can be tried. And you can ask at where you're receiving treatment if they know of any clinical trials. Generally, you're going to find those clinical trials at an NCI-designated cancer center. It's the National Cancer Institute Designated Cancer Center. And we're going to put on our website how to find designated cancer centers, how to find clinical trials, questions that you can ask. Know that if you do go into a clinical trial, you can stop it at any time. It's your right to be in it, and it's your right not to be in it. You can make that decision. What do you have any questions about clinical trials?
No, this has been really interesting to hear.
I've told you everything you want to know.
Well, it's just been interesting to hear it in detail. I mean, daily we hear something about clinical trials being, of course, the huge issue is coronavirus, but clinical trials and how even this is erupted into a controversy with clinical trials. So no, it's good to hear the whole story instead of just 5 or 10-second sound bites. Thank you.
You're welcome. And also, it's not a conspiracy theory to keep something out of your hands. It's safety so that you don't end up with 20 toes growing out of your ear or something unfortunate happening to you while you're taking a drug that hasn't been tested.
You say 20 toes like it's a bad thing, but okay, fine.
Well, I like you despite your toes out of your ears.
Yeah, it is the ear thing.
But
sounds weird. Mm-hmm.
Check out our webpage for information about how to find a clinical trial and all of that. And let us know if you have any other questions about it. In our third half, I'm going to go out drinking with Death because Charlie's over there in Little Italy. So I'm going to go have a drink with Death. Welcome to the third half of Everyone Dies. I am having the opportunity to have a morning cocktail with Death. How are you, Death?
I'm well this morning. How are you?
Great. What are you drinking?
Me, I'm very fond of Mai Tais. It's sort of a morning drink. It's got fruit in it. It's got a little umbrella in it. It makes me happy.
Well, if you're happy, the rest of us are happy, I wanted to ask you about the experience that I've seen of one of the experiences I've seen of dying in the United States is that people can go for almost their entire lives without ever actually seeing a death. My ex-husband, when he turned 70, had both of his parents still alive and had only seen one death because he sat with a family friend as she was dying, and she happened to die on his shift. And I think to myself, well, when you grow up in a different culture or you grow up on a farm, you see birth, you see death, you see the circle of life. And seems like you can be in the United States and see birth, but don't ever see the other end. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what death is like.
Sure, happy to do that. I think the point you bring up is that for most people in the United States and in much of the developed world, illness in general is kept out of view. And any information that they've learned about death, they get from television or some other media approach, whether it's in a movie or streaming or whatever. And those are manufactured to be entertaining, dramatic, and to all tie up by the end of the hour or the end of the 2-hour movie. Real dying for most people is actually quite banal. It's not dramatic. It's not sudden. There is plenty of time for preparation. Most people die of an illness of which they know the name. It lasts for a period of months to years. And in its final stages, people become more and more tired. They spend more time in their bed sleeping. They have less of an appetite. They drink less. It's not because they don't like your food. It's not because they're being oppositional. They generally have less appetite. They drink less. They sleep more until they spend all the time sleeping. And then I come sometime when they're sleeping and they die in their sleep. The biggest challenge I see is for people to recognize this is happening, to not think it's willful on the part of the person, that they're willfully not eating or drinking, or they're willfully not giving up or not trying to beat this. Diseases are relentless in how they take the body's energy. And the appropriate response is to recognize, this person I love is getting sicker and death is closer than it was before. What do I need to do now to make meaning and say things, do things that I don't want to wait one more minute for? Too many people are procrastinators. They put off, or they don't recognize what's happening. And I get a kick out of the ones where sometimes there's a false alarm. People do rally. Well, if you've had Christmas in July and then somebody rallies, well, so what? We'll have Christmas again in August. So what?
Do you think it's part of the American culture to want to control things, to control life in terms of, inducing labor when it fits into our schedule, and control death in the same way?
I think people like predictability. And in the Western world, we've been able to be very predictable. The public health, sewage, all the things that used to make people sick enough for me to come are generally under control. The COVID is a great example of something that hasn't been controlled, and there is a sudden quality to it. So I think that wanting a predictable life is the thing that most characterizes the developed world. And illness and the losses that come with that, that's not part of the plan. And I'm impressed with how much people resist change. They would rather have it all stay predictable, even when the change is there. It's obvious for all to see. I'm impressed with how many people are surprised when the doctors have been able to see it coming for years.
Well, do you think that they're surprised because they don't believe their own mortality, or are they surprised because even though the doctors have been seeing it for years, they haven't really told the person as clearly as could be?
Well, I think part of the predictability is emotional predictability and avoiding emotional outbursts and being upset. At least what I observe is a very interesting little dance that happens, that doctors are overwhelmingly willing to talk about the illness and its course and what's likely to happen. But because their mothers all taught them, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. So they're waiting for a cue from the patient or the family to bring it up, that they want to talk about it. On the patient and family side, who had the same mother, who said, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all, don't make other people upset, and don't ask the doctor what's on their minds. They worry that the doctor is busy, that she's worried with other things, and so they don't bring it up. So this has a striking relationship to long-term love relationships. People who love each other selectively withhold information from the other person out of love, not to distress them, but to keep a harmonious environment. And so I see love relationships between patients and their doctors. And doctors love their patients. Patients love their doctors. And then we have this trap where the thing that is in the air, but there's this tacit agreement not to talk about it. And the outcome is procrastination and delay. And then there are genuinely missed opportunities that didn't have to happen. So my advice is, if it's on your mind, bring it up. Your doctor will talk to you about it if you make it clear that you want to know.
And so that's a good lesson for us as people interacting with the healthcare system, is to ask the questions that we really want to have answers to. Some of our questions from our listeners. Patty from Texas wants to know, what is your greatest fear?
I don't like being ignored. I don't like people pretending that I don't exist or won't come. I like a sense of respect. And so I suppose my greatest fear is that people will think I'm irrelevant or that I'm somehow optional.
Mm-hmm. I see that with patients when I work in palliative care and oncology, is that, and I think you used the term just a little while ago about fighting it. And, I'm going to beat this, I'm going to fight this. And I've had situations where I've talked with patients about, there's just some things that can't be beat. We're built as mortal beings. And as such, you maybe can delay, but you can't beat it.
So I see that the winner loser, it's a false choice. It's a false dichotomy that if you're not a winner, you're a loser. But what I observe, particularly in the U.S., although you see it in other parts of the world, using the metaphors of war and the metaphors of sports for illness, when being a fighter is, at least what I observe, is part of the nature of a human being. You could be a fighter always, but what you fight for, the thing you're fighting for, can change over time. You make the point, there are some cancers that we do not know the cure for. Well, no one argues that you should fight for something if there is no chance for success. You fight for the things that you can achieve. So fighting for length of life, fighting for quality of life, fighting for your family to be safe, fighting to be sure that your affairs are in order so you're not an excessive burden. Those are all qualities of a fighter. And I've come to get many people who are fighters. They're fighters to the end, including fighting for a good death that's not prolonged, that's not overly medicalized, where the best of human nature is on view: love, long suffering, selflessness for others. Those are things worth fighting for.
Well, I'll drink to that, death. And thank you for having a little breakfast drink with me. And I look forward to having a cocktail with you in the future.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Molly, our Twitter correspondent, and our friends, family, and loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And I'm Marianne Matzow, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.